I just want you for one moment to imagine living in a world or navigating yourself in a world where you have your sense of self, masculinity, and leadership are constantly being challenged by societal norms and pressures. As men, you're expected to excel in relationships, career, and our family life. But what happens when you're not given the tools or even the understanding to do so? How do we break through this noise and reclaim our identity and our authentic purpose? So too often for men, we find ourselves stuck in roles defined by others, disconnected from our own values and self-authenticity. And so the result of this is that it's a life that feels constrained, unfulfilled, and far from the greatness that we're truly capable of achieving. And so in today's episode, we're going to explore the deep and unfound, often unspoken struggles men face, uncovering how to rediscover authentic masculinity, foster stronger relationships, and embrace a leadership in every aspect of our life. This is going to be more than just about personal growth. It's about really stepping into our purpose that has the power to transform not only the life that we live, but the lives around us as well. And before we get into today's topic, let's take a moment to talk about something else that could potentially change your life. Because we all know how hard it is to stay true to ourselves and in a world that's constantly pulling us in different directions. So the pressures for us is to provide, perform, persevere, and leave us feeling disconnected, like we're drifting further from the men we want to be. So if you've ever felt stuck or frustrated and unsure of how to bridge the gap between the life you have and the life you want, then let me introduce to living with integrity. It's more than just a program. It's a roadmap of transformation. You're going to learn how to align your actions with your values, rebuild your meaningful connections, and create a legacy that truly matters. So if you're ready to take control of your life with purpose, become the family man that your family is actually looking for, and your community in the future that really needs you to be, I'm going to challenge you to start today. Just go to the members.theawakenedman.net and start your journey by taking the integrity challenge today. Because the only thing standing between you and the life you're capable of is the decision to take the first step. And with that, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life. Many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. My name is Alan DeMonto. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement. And so before we get started, allow me to ask you a couple of questions. How can you understand and embrace authentic masculinity and transform not only your life, but also your relationship and your leadership style? And what societal pressures might be holding you back from fully stepping into your identity as a man? And how can you overcome these? The journey to authentic masculinity and leadership begins with understanding yourself and challenging the societal norms that hold us back. And today we're going to explore how reclaiming your identity can lead to deeper relationships, greater confidence, and more powerful purpose. So allow me to introduce my guest who's going to walk us through all of this today. Josh Tomeoni is a coach, entrepreneur, and host of the Derelict Podcast, where he creates a space for men to be real about their struggles and failures. Over 18 years, he's built a successful financial planning companies, and while learning from the setbacks in marriage, business, and parenting, and so much more. Josh believes that failure is the stepping stone to success, and shares his journey to help others navigate their own challenges. And he's also a father of three, passionate about adventure, travel, living with authenticity. And I always say, if you really want to learn something about yourself, get married, have kids, and start a business. And so, Josh, you're doing all three of those. I'm looking forward to having you on the show. How are things, my friend?
Thank you, Alan. That was quite the introduction. Quite a bunch to live up to. I'll try my best.
I'm sure there will.
I'm doing great. We were just having a conversation right before it started about some of your upcoming travels, and I love to travel as well. So yeah. I'm excited. Let's dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. Here on the Revolutionary Man podcast, Josh, we always talk about everyone being on their own hero's journey. We call it a hero's quest. And so my first question to you, and I've tweaked it a little bit, is to tell us about your life and rebirth moment. What's that moment that really shaped your life? And how did that experience shape you into the man you are today and the work that you're doing?
It's a good question. I've had several of those. I can't point to just one. I usually call them spiritual awakenings. I think that no matter what you believe, religious, spiritual, whatever, there are these moments in our life where we have this awakening and we realize whatever version of ourself needs to be shed, kind of like a lizard, right? Like we got to get rid of that exoskeleton and move on to whatever the next version of ourselves are. Or we could always choose not to do that and just live miserably and have that exoskeleton slowly suffer us to death. We could do that. I would say the most recent one that I've had was probably my third midlife crisis that I've had. I started young, but this one actually was when I was turning 40. And when I was turning 40, I asked myself a very simple question. I was 39 years old, obviously, and I said, hey, Josh, I had this conversation with myself, which sometimes I do. I said, Josh, what is your mission? What is your purpose? What is your mission? Why are you here on this planet when you're 50? That was my question to myself. And I came up with a lot of answers. The majority of my answers were very in line with what you're doing on your podcast, which is part of the reason I decided to be a guest on here. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do. And that was that I realized that my biggest passion in life was to coach people, which I currently do. But even bigger than that was to try to coach men into their authentic masculinity, specifically men that are in that midlife period that often get overlooked or often get told not to live in their masculinity by our world. They're often told, hey, if you live in your masculinity, it's toxic, it's evil, it's chauvinistic. And instead, what you should do is just get rid of all that nasty masculinity stuff and just be feminine. And there's nothing wrong. We all have femininity and masculinity. We're not talking about male, female here. Every single man, every single woman has both. The majority of men have majority masculine traits. The majority of women have majority feminine traits. So that's who I'm really speaking to right now. So to tell a man that has majority masculine traits that he needs to get rid of all of those and have feminine traits instead makes him inauthentic, the same way it would be saying that to a woman who has primarily feminine traits. So I realized that my purpose in life was to help men rediscover what that looks like in their life and to help coach them through that. A very sobering statistic that I talk about a lot when I guest on podcasts is that I don't know if this is true in Canada. I'm in the United States, but I do know that in the United States, the highest rate of suicide among any group is 35 to 50-year-old men. Why is that? It's the prime of our life. I think both of us are at least close to that bucket, if not in that bucket. Why is that? Why are so many men just deciding to end it all in the prime of their life when they've really gotten their career underway? They probably have their family underway. They have an idea of who they are as a person. And I think, frankly, I'm not blaming this on society, but I think it's because men get to a point where they think I'm not enough, or whatever it is that I thought I was, I can't be. And I don't know how to be the authentic version of myself. And whatever this version is, I don't like. Therefore, I just don't know if it's worth trying anymore.
Yeah.
And it's really incredibly sad. And my whole mission and passion in life is to help be there for men when I didn't have someone there for me in my darkest of days, whether that meant a business failure, the divorce that I went through, you name it. I failed at everything. And all failure is, like you said earlier, it just means that you didn't do what you're trying to do. If that's the definition, I fail every single day. So let's not be scared of the word.
Yeah.
But I want to be there for men that don't know where to go next. And they don't necessarily have to be suicidal. That's an extreme example. But just a man that wants to go to the next version of himself. And there's just something holding him back. And by the way, Alan, I don't have this figured out. Like I still deal with this stuff too. I have limiting mindsets and beliefs every single day of my life. So I'm not saying I've figured it out. I've just helped enough men walk through it that I can see the signs. I can see the patterns. And frankly, I have coaches in my own life because I
Yes.
know that I need the same thing, just like I try to help with other men.
Yeah, Josh, all of what you've just said just resonates so deeply with me and our work that we're doing here as well, because I think we have those death and rebirth experiences in our life, and it's because it helps us look at what's working and not working. And to your point, we can either choose to do something about it, or we can allow this exoskeleton to start to actually constrict us and choke us. And I think it's really important that there are more of us doing men's work and doing it in a way that resonates with us, because then we're being authentic. And I say the same thing to my guys. If you're looking for a guru program, this is not the program for you. I've figured out a few things. I might be down the path a little further in different areas of life, but we need to do this as a group. We learned about healthy masculinity and who we are as men by being around other men. And so when you started to talk about that in the stats about suicide, those are virtually identical in Canada as well. Something like 4 times as many men commit suicide as women do. And in the top 5, even at 60, I'm 58, I'll be 59 here this year. It's the stats don't get any better for men. And so as we get older, if we still haven't accomplished what we felt we wanted to in our 20s, and we're getting that close to that edge of retirement, and there isn't something for us to go forward to or go on to next to, it's even a bigger problem. And so let's talk a little bit about this work that you're doing, and so grateful that you're doing it. But you also talk about, excuse me, not only is authentic masculinity about living truly with what your values are, but how are you employing this in your life and now leading other men to do it?
Yeah, sure. A lot of it is just, I don't know how to answer that question. It's a very good question. I'm just not sure how to put it in a little packaged bow, to be honest with you. I think where it all starts is awareness.
Yeah.
And I think in general, as men, and any men that are listening or watching, feel free to reach out to me and tell me that you disagree. That's fine. But I think in general, as men, we have not only the societal expectation, but expectation from other men, expectation from people that we talk to, expectation from our family, friends, etc., that somehow we have to figure it out. That we, as my grandpa used to say, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and try again. You fall off the horse, you get back on it. You fall down, you pick yourself back up. The answer is always just do it again. It's never become aware of what's happening, understand what's actually going on within you so that you can then become a better person. It's just go do it again. And that's not always the answer. The answer isn't always just go do something. I know a lot of guys like to say this on social media because it's an easy social media clip. Just do stuff. Don't do anything else. Just do stuff. Okay, that's fine to a degree,
Yep.
but that also is a key prescription of somebody who keeps just doing stuff and then drops dead at 42 and everyone's, what happened? The guy was healthy, he ran, he dieted, he did all these things. Now he's dead. That's because he just stuffed things in his life
Yep.
forever. He just kept doing stuff and then he's out.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't like that prescription myself. But the other side of it, the answer I think, so often get in our society is this kind of feminized version of a man that sits around, talks about his feelings all the time, cries, wears mascara, does all the things of, oh, I'm just going to be this emotional mess. And that's not femininity either, by the way. This is just some weird version of femininity that society likes to bring along because for whatever reason, it's dramatic and everything else. That's not any better either. That's not the answer. I talk about this sometimes. I don't actually believe in the term toxic masculinity. And let me explain for a second why. I'm not saying there's not toxic individuals. There are toxic men. There's also toxic women. So let's not be sexist here. There's toxics everybody. There's people that act in a very toxic way. I personally don't believe that anybody that's acting toxic is acting out of their true nature, because I believe people in their true nature are beautiful, wonderful, created beings. But I do believe that people act in toxic ways for whatever reason. If a man is acting toxic, that's not their masculinity. Their masculinity is pure, it's authentic. Masculinity is a beautiful thing, just like femininity is. If somebody's acting out of their femininity or their true masculinity, they're not acting toxic. So I think part of the problem with even calling it toxic masculinity is that you're relating masculinity, say that 5 times real fast. You're relating masculinity to toxicity, and those two should not be related. There is toxicity and there is masculinity. So if somebody's acting toxic, say they're acting toxic. I have no problem with that whatsoever. There are people that act toxic, but it's not because of their masculinity.
That's right.
So the problem with calling it toxic masculinity is that the only answer for that is the opposite, which is femininity. Then you have a society that just adds femininity anytime masculinity is brought up, because masculinity itself then ends up being seen as toxic or evil or chauvinistic or bad.
Yeah.
And now you have an overly feminized society where you're missing the masculine traits. And by the way, the same thing can happen if you have an overly masculine society and you're missing the feminine traits.
Yeah.
That also doesn't work well. So I'm not saying one is better than the other here. I'm saying they're beautiful in how they work together.
Yes.
It's true. And this is not also like a straight gay thing either. In every couple that lasts, every couple that actually works well, there's going to be somebody who's primarily masculine and somebody that's primarily feminine.
Correct.
Mark my words, 2 primarily feminine people, whether they're male or female, doesn't matter, don't work. 2 primarily masculine men or men or women, just masculine people, do not work.
Yep.
And what ends up happening, what I've seen a lot, is that men are told, don't be masculine. So they bring on more of their feminine traits that aren't really naturally them. Then a woman feels like she has to be more masculine because the masculine energy has gone there. And there's still this combination of there needs to be both.
Right.
The woman increases more masculine energy than she has in her life. The man increases more feminine energy than he has in his life. Both people are living inauthentic, and then they hate each other for it.
Yes.
And then they're bitter and they're resentful, and it grows and grows till one day, all of a sudden they get divorced and all their friends sit around and say, they seem like such a great couple. What happened?
It's so true. And I think what you've dropped many things there. And I just want to go back to, you talked a lot about these expectations. And I think that's really important for us to understand, is that when we consider whether it's coming from societal, it's coming through other men, or it's coming through family, that how we embody that says a lot about who we are, how we're identifying. And I think if there's important work for us to do as men, is to recognize where our identity is coming from. Not to say, to your point, is not to say that it's bad because you're adopting it from other places, but is it true for you?
Right.
Is it really true? Because if it isn't, then it goes back to your other point, where you start raising, I need to be more feminine and more nurturing, more caring, more. And so you start ramping that up. And while those are all excellent traits, if you're not being decisive, which is more of a masculine trait, I'll suggest, in stepping into it and being involved in your relationships, then you're going to be tired, man, because you've got this mask that you're holding on, and it's not who you are. And that's how we lose disrespect. And that's exactly what happened in my first marriage. I married my high school sweetheart. And in the end, what ended up happening is that I was just totally emasculated because I just thought I needed to be a nice guy. And so when you fall into that aspect, then she loses respect for you. And you lose respect for yourself because you're not standing up. And I think that's so important. And the other piece I wanted to mention, just to touch on the toxic masculinity, I heard somebody say, the way they also described it was that hurt people. And so when you look at the behaviors, what's going on behind it for them? Now, maybe it's a consistent behavior and they are toxic as an individual, but what got them to that point? And maybe there's a way for us to look at how we can show up as father figures or leaders that to help them grow and move through that and transition them through that. And I'm sure you do that in your work as we do here. And so lots of great points there. I hope guys that are listening are understanding what we're saying is that there's a need for both aspects of those energies in life, and how we dial them up or not really impacts how the success of our relationships. Great points. Love those.
Agreed. Just to reiterate, not every man has primarily masculine energy.
Correct.
Some men have primarily feminine energy. It's just a lot less.
Yeah.
It's probably 80% of men have primarily masculine energy. 80% of women have primarily feminine energy. So that still leaves 20% of men and women that are on the other side. So you have to understand what your primary energy is and how to live authentically in that energy. Because if you're living authentically in that energy, a lot of problems disappear. Trust me, they do.
Yeah.
Because I was the same way in my first marriage as well, Alan, where I allowed myself to essentially become emasculated as well and become in a lot of that kind of, it was more codependent and also some like feminine energy because I just was trying to keep everything okay.
Yep.
And I didn't man up. And I don't mean man up like everybody means on social media where it's, oh, you got to hit the gym for 4 hours a day. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying living in my actual authentic masculine energy.
Yes.
Because here's the deal. Here's a controversial take that's true. Every feminist in the world that spouts feminism as loud as possible, I don't care if it's a man or a female, every feminist in the entire world, what they actually want is more masculine energy in their life, more healthy masculine energy. Now, they go about this by thinking that masculine energy is toxic. So they think the answer often is more feminine energy. Ask any of them if they're happy with the results. They're not. Why? They're not happy with the results because they're not seeing that healthy masculine energy is actually an answer to the problem they have. What they're also not seeing is that oftentimes they bring on masculine energy that's not authentic to themselves.
Right.
So then a man often matches that with feminine energy that's not authentically themselves. And we're back to the same point we just talked about. You have a woman who's primarily feminine energy acting masculine. You have a man who's primary masculine energy acting feminine. It doesn't work. Here's a better analogy maybe for people that are listening that are like, I'm getting so stuck with this whole masculine feminine thing because we've said it a million times already on this podcast. Here's a better way of thinking about it. Think about the time that you were a chameleon. Everybody's been a chameleon. You've gone somewhere and you thought that you needed to act in a certain way in order to fit in. Maybe it was a golf country club and you were poor and you realized, wow, maybe I need to dress a little better. I need to speak a little better. I need to not show the fact that I'm missing 5 teeth, whatever it is, right? You go to a symphony for the first time and you realize, oh man, maybe I need to dress up for this. Maybe this is a different environment than I'm used to. Maybe you're used to being dressed up and you go to a client who is an electrician. You show up in a 3-piece suit and everybody looks at you sideways. Who is this fool? I don't want to listen to this guy. So it's not a better or worse. It's just think about the time where you've been in a situation. Maybe it was with your spouse's friends and they're very different than you. They have very different political beliefs or they have very different religious beliefs or whatever it is. And you felt like you had to put on this suit. You had to put on this different skin. Tell me one time you had to do that and you felt completely free and open and authentic in yourself. It doesn't happen, right?
No.
Because you can't. It's not authentically you. You can pretend all you want. Ask any actor. I've been on stage. I've done some minor acting. I'm telling you, if you are acting a different role, you do your best to try to get in the state of whatever that person would be in. But at the end of the day, it's not you. And most of the best actors and actresses that exist are the ones that play roles that fit well with themselves. Doesn't mean that they don't change things about themselves, but the ones that they authentically can portray come across better. There's very few, I would say, even actors that cannot do that. If you look at most actors and actresses, there's a similar theme with every role they play. It might not be the same role, but there's a similar theme with most of them. Not all. Some
Yeah.
are like just crazy and they can do anything. And you're like, I don't understand how you do all of these different roles. But most of them, there's some sort of similar thing. It's the same thing as we are with humans.
Yeah.
And there's another thing that you brought up earlier too that I want to be really careful of as well. I'm not saying because society, your family, your friends, your connections, etc., encourage you to be a certain way. I'm not saying that allows us, any of us as men, to play the victim card.
No.
Because playing the victim card never helps.
No.
It doesn't help me. It doesn't help the people that I'm playing it with. It just doesn't help. So I'm not saying it's anyone else's fault but my own. When I was that emasculated male in my marriage, I would not blame that on that was not my wife's
No.
fault. I had the choice to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do that. That's on me. I have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's such an important point in everything that we're talking about here, is that regardless of where and how we formed our identity, it's up to us to be responsible. I think I always know when I'm ready for change is that when I'm ready to take responsibility for where I am in a situation. Okay, so how did I get here? These were my decisions, my choices. So how I've been thinking about it. I'm ready. So I'm also willing then not to just take responsibility for where I am, but for who I am. I'm the guy who did this. If I want something different, if I want to have a different body, then it's up to me to take responsibility and do something different about that, whatever that looks like. And then who do I aspire to become? What do I want? You talked about in your opening there at 40, thinking about what is my life going to look like at 50? And how many men today would even think past this weekend, let alone 10 years? And so when you start
That was me for most of my life, man. I get it.
Yeah. And in some parts of my life today, it's still like that. And I think that's why our work this year with our group is really about, when I say living with integrity in our own lives in different aspects. How are we showing up? Are we showing up truly authentic? What are my values and my beliefs around finances, relationships, my business, everything? How am I showing up? Because in some parts of our life, I bet you show up like super well. You're totally aligned. Everything runs smooth. And then there's probably other parts of your life that's not the case. And so how we show up and be more consistent and be more authentic really takes us into having some self-introspection. And you wrote a book on this stuff. You talked in your books, The 5 Traps That Men Face When We Go in Divorce. And that really, when we go through divorce, it forces us to look at and take responsibility for things. And so many of us have been through that really brutal ordeal. And so in your book, you talk about one of the traps that we fall into is tanking. So tell me what your idea about this tanking is and how it is that this trap is burning men alive.
Sure. Yeah. The 5th trap is tanking relationships post-divorce. And I specifically speak of 2 different categories of relationships. The number one relationship I discuss is the one with your spouse or your soon-to-be ex-spouse. And there's a couple of different ways of tanking that relationship. And it's like a spectrum. So on this side is be a dick at all times and just play the victim and think that everything is their fault and spew vomit about them, not only to them, but to everyone that you know, to your children, so on and so forth. You've met that person. Maybe you've been that person. I don't know. Maybe we all have. So there's that side of things. And on this side of things, it's really critical. It's like being careful what you're watching for your mind, right? If I watch the same horrific stuff all the time in my mind, it's going to be implanted in my mind. It just is. So you can do whatever you want. You're an adult. I don't care. Everybody watching this, do whatever you want. But if you consistently watch the same thing, that's what you're going to get programmed with. It's like politics. If you consistently watch the same channel that's saying the same thing about the same party, about the same thing, you're going to believe it. And then you're going to think it's your thought when it's reality. It's just the propaganda you've been fed into your mind and you're believing the propaganda.
Yep.
I don't care what side it is. It's the same thing over here. Even calling my ex-spouse does something negative in my brain. Because what that does is it makes me think of this person as a failed relationship that somehow screwed me over. So one of the things I learned very early on going through my divorce process is that I try never to call her my ex-spouse. And I may have already done it in this podcast because I mess up sometimes.
Yep.
What I try to call her every single time I'm referencing who this person is my kid's mom.
Ah, nice.
Because that's always positive.
Yeah. Nice
Because when
reframe.
I say my kid's mom, like it's impossible for me not to get a little smile because I love my kids and I want what's best for them. So if I can think of her in that context, it's much better than that bitch who took half my shit and more of my stuff and everything, blah, 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 and ruined my life and blah, blah. Like it's just even the titling of it. Like I remember what I even had to do on this side was that there were several people in my life that were Team Josh, that were all for me during my divorce and everything else, that I had to ask to stop speaking negatively about her because they would do it to try to, I don't know, be on the same page as me or something else. I think they had the best intentions. But after a while, I'm like, look, I need as positive thoughts as possible about this person.
Yeah.
This person is my children's mother. I want what's best for her. I want what's best for her, and I want her to have the best relationship with my kids as she possibly can. Now, does that mean if there's toxicity in there, you don't need to set boundaries? And of course, there's all that stuff. But I still want the best possible feelings about her. The other side of that spectrum, that was long-winded. The other side of that spectrum is too cozy with that person. And that is the person that goes back and, I don't know, maybe get a little intimate, maybe have some sex, maybe kind of play around with staying in the relationship. And not only does that hurt you, what it really hurts is the kids. What I see oftentimes when somebody goes through a divorce is they're like really trying to speak as good as possible for this person and keep a really good friendship and everything else. And if you're not clear with your kids that you're done, that you are never getting back together, their little minds, especially if they're young,
Yes.
will constantly think, oh man, mommy and daddy are going to get back together. That is super unhealthy. Even if you do get back together one day, great, let it happen, but don't speak that way to your kids.
Yes.
Ever. Be very clear. We are done. We are divorced. We are never getting back together. And that's okay. We both love you. There's different households. There's a lot of different things you can say, but do not keep that kids open. That's so unhealthy. And I've seen a lot of people do that. So going back to tanking relationships post-divorce, two biggest ones, the ex relationship or the kid's mom relationship or whatever. And I just talked about the two sides of that. The second one, which is the biggest one. Now there's a whole lot of others. Like if I picked a number three, there'd be family and friends and community, all that sort of stuff changes. But the second really big one is dating. And I'll tell you what, when I interviewed people for my book, I interviewed several people, asked them what they thought the biggest traps in their divorce were. It was ironic because we all had the same answer for all five of them. It was shocking after I interviewed dozens of people. But the number one thing that I heard from the most people was I started dating too soon.
Yeah.
And I heard that from somebody who started dating the next day. I heard that from somebody that started dating years later. It was the same answer. The time frame didn't matter. It was that they started dating in a state where they were not complete themselves. They were not living their authentic identity. They were not healthy themselves. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be 100% healthy. None of us are. If I waited for that, I'd never date ever again. But what it does mean is that I need to be healthy enough to where I can be a healthy individual meeting another healthy individual. And for the most part, people start dating because they get lonely and because they feel bad and because they want somebody to fill some sort of hole that they're not going to fill. We all do it. I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sitting there thinking about which guy was I or in these relationships, right? And taking it. I'm definitely was that guy that, while I didn't speak harshly about my kid's mom, she was definitely an ex. And so it's a great nuance and reframe about considering about how important, while I may not agree, obviously our relationship didn't work out that we could be together, there's still my boy's mom. And they still look up to her and they still see her as their mom, which is fantastic because there are those kids that, because of, for whatever reason, that they totally disassociate with one of the parents, then I'm happy to see that relationship is still strong with them.
Yeah, here's the thing though. Like you got to let kids, they will make their own decision about
Yeah.
both of their parents. And if you try to meddle with that or manipulate that at all, they're also going to eventually see that, even if they're young.
Yes.
And when they see that, bad news for you and your relationship with your kids. I'm just telling you, you got to let the kids come up with their own conclusion. And that is so much easier said than done. I've definitely let things slip that I wish I hadn't. Of course I have. I've tried my best not to, but I definitely have. And there's probably been elements where they're like, "Oh man, he thinks this about mom," which is a bummer. And I wish I wouldn't have done any of those things.
Yeah.
But I try my best to just let them have whatever opinion they need to have. And now my oldest is only 12, so they're all still pretty young. But even with my oldest now, I've started to just be a little bit more. Let's talk about this concept for a second. There's a difference between honesty and privacy. So you can be honest with your kids and not share every single detail.
That's right.
And that's really critical because at age appropriate levels, it's age appropriate to share some details. It's not appropriate to share other details. If I were to sit down, my youngest was really little at the time. And this doesn't even apply to me because there weren't any affairs or anything. But let's just say that there was an affair and you sit down and you explain to your 5-year-old the affair that happened. That's completely inappropriate.
Yes.
I would call that child abuse. That is completely inappropriate. If your adult son comes to you at 22 and says, "I really want to know what happened here, Dad. Did mom have an affair?" Then you have a choice to make. If you decide that you want to tell him that information, why not? He's 22 years old.
Yep.
You have to decide if that's good for you and your relationship with him. You can still choose not to, but
Yep.
it's very different telling him at 22 than telling him at 4.
Yes.
So you got to figure out age appropriate ways of having these conversations for sure. But the other thing is, it's just going to look bad on you if you are trying to. Kids can pick up on it. They see when people are trying to manipulate them, when they're trying to convince them. Even little kids do. They just do.
Yeah, I like the direction that we're talking about this with, being in the divorce space now and having kids. My children are in their early 30s. And so just recently, like this past year, so we had a bit of a struggle. Their mom and I split when they were preschoolers. And so it's been quite a number of years. And it's always been a bit of a distant relationship with my two boys for several reasons. But my youngest one now has started to, dad's at that point where I'm starting to be cool again to hang out with. And you want to spend a little bit. He's asking some information, asking for advice. And so we got a beautiful backyard, a fire pit, and that. And so this past summer, he was over. He'd come by and have a chat. And he's asking me about things about relationships. And while it wasn't directly about my marriage with his mom, he wanted to use it as an analogy because he's 30. Mm-hmm. And so, to your point, between honesty and privacy. So it was more of a conversation about conceptual things because he was going through some stuff in his relationship and said, "Okay, this is what I'm witnessing, how your relationship's unfolding. And this is how it looked in my relationship with your mom." So we got into talking about things about trust in the relationship and how he was showing up and what is acceptable for him to allow to happen and not, and what are the potential outcomes of all of that. And so it really is important to understand at what age level are you talking to your children at, because they may not be ready for all of this stuff. And even at 30, again, even though I was pretty mindful about, he doesn't need to know the gory details. I'm sure on your podcast interviewing guys have gone through some pretty horrific stuff. It's not about the detail or the gore or the horror of it. It's about that transformational journey that they've gone through.
So I make it very clear to people when I'm coming on a podcast, because a lot of people want to hear specifics about my story and that sort of thing. And one thing that I make really clear whenever I guest on a podcast is I'm not here to throw anyone under the bus ever. Yeah. I'm more interested in what's better for your audience or any audience is to hear how this transformed my life so that can be an inspiration to them and how that might transform their life. No one is better by me coming on here and bitching about whatever my ex did.
100%.
It just doesn't make anybody better.
Yeah.
And I would also caution men that are watching and listening to this right now, be even cautious when you talk to your bros about this sort of thing as well. Because the more you reiterate something in your head, the more you believe it. It's like the concept of a lot of guys get upset with me when they're out there in the dating world, and I'm in the dating world as well, so I understand this. And they'll read a dating profile or meet with a woman or whatever, and they'll hear men are blank. Women are blank. Men are always blank. The more you say that, even if you're joking, the more your brain believes it.
Yeah.
So stop saying it, because it's not true. There is no men are always blank, women are always blank. There is no statement that's true of.
Right.
There just isn't. So stop saying it. And I would encourage you to stop saying that in your relationships as well. Because I've done this plenty of times. So I'm not saying I figured this out. I just know the more of those thoughts that I allow to enter my mind, even if somebody else is saying it, let's take this one step further. Even if somebody else is, she is blank. If you don't correct them, you believe it. Even if you don't believe it, it's subtle. It's very subtle. But if you are constantly talking to your parent or your sibling or your friend, and they're constantly saying whatever about your ex or whoever it's about, if you're not correcting it, you're not correcting your brain, and you're just allowing it to go in your brain. And eventually it's going to come out in ways that you don't expect. It really is. So real quick too, Alan, before I forget, I wanted to offer a resource to all your listeners and viewers as well. So that ebook that you mentioned, The 5 Traps Men Face When Going Through Divorce and How to Triumph Over Them, you can feel free to go on Amazon right now, look up my name and go buy it. Or if you want, reach out to me on Instagram, send me a message. My handle, I'll give it to you for the show notes later.
Yeah.
I think the one you have is actually inaccurate. My Instagram handle is Josh the Derelict, Derelict. So Josh the Derelict. If you just send me a message on Instagram, please send me these words: revolutionary ebook, because that'll remind me that it's coming from the Revolutionary Man podcast, where we are right now, and that you want the ebook. So send me revolutionary ebook to Josh the Derelict, and I will send you a copy of it for free.
Love that, brother. Love that.
And honestly, even if you already gone through a divorce, send it anyway. I tell you, there are things in that book that you have not done yet, or that you could do better. I promise you, because when I read that book myself and I wrote it, I'm like, man, I could do better at this. So read it. And then if you want additional, I'll add one other thing. If you also want additional resources, like we're talking about age appropriate ways of talking about divorce, things like that, send me a message at Josh the Derelict, and I'm happy to send you other resources as well, other books that I have, etc.
Love that. I love that.
Alan,
absolutely.
I'm really sorry to can I pause for just 1 second? I have to grab something in the room. I apologize.
You know, one of the last things, a couple of things I want to summarize what we've been talking about, and really we've been teasing all around the idea of leadership and really about being strong leaders. If you were to come across a man right now who is struggling either with his personal or his professional life and he's looking for some help, what advice would you be giving him today?
That's a great question. And you're actually bringing up something that I wanted to say earlier that I forgot. So I appreciate you saying that. When we have all this conversation about taking responsibility for your action, and it goes back to, let's go back to the definition of failure. If you look up the definition of failure, the first definition is not succeeding, which is not a helpful definition. If you look at the second definition of failure, it says that something you were intending to do, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, something that you were intending to do, some sort of goal that you were intending to do was not accomplished. So all failure is that somebody set out for something and it didn't happen. Now, if that's the definition of failure, that means I fail every single day of my life. If I was trying to walk across the room without tripping and I trip, that's a failure. But we have in our mind that a failure means I'm a failure as a person.
Yes.
It turns into shame. It turns into, I am a terrible person. I'm worthless, and it's not even worth sticking around. So here's something that I think really important for everybody to hear. This is not a message of pick up yourself by your bootstraps and try again. That's not what we're saying here. Failure is an opportunity to have some awareness of what's going on in your life, to be confident, gentle, and loving with yourself through that, to stay curious about what's going on, and then figure out what you want for your life. That's it. It's a really simple process. The very first step, which I would say is probably the most important, is just staying curious. It's easy for me, and I think it is for us as men in general, to see a problem and want to fix it, to see something that's wrong and say, that's wrong. It's not wrong. It's just different than we want it to be. So the very first thing I have to do to be gentle with myself is to be curious about what about this is wrong, right? What about this is wrong? I'll put it in quotes. What about this is what I don't want it to be? And if I can stay curious about that, then I can be honest with myself about what it is, where I'm at right now, and where I want to go. There's no shame in that, because that doesn't mean I failed as a person. It just means that I'm in a different spot than where I want to be. If I can do that in a curious way without shaming myself, it's much easier to come up with a game plan of what to do next. If you shame yourself and you say that you're a shitty person, it's really hard to build a game plan around that, because that just turns into a cycle of I'm terrible and this is terrible and everything's terrible and we're all terrible. It just doesn't, it doesn't help anybody. So I would say the first thing is just be curious about what you're feeling. And this could be a very simple exercise where you literally take out a notepad and just write down. Just be curious. Pretend like you are an observer of yourself. If you were viewing somebody else acting the way that you're acting and thinking what you're thinking, and you're viewing them in a coffee shop, what would you write about them? Let's say that you're a poet. You just want to write down whatever it is that you see about that person. Feel the same way about yourself. Then be curious about what you read and be very aware if there's any judgment that you're giving of yourself while you're reading this. Because even if you're curious during that, you might read it and then judge yourself. Like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. It's part of the reason, not to toot my own horn or your own horn, Alan, but it's part of the reason I personally, for myself, need a coach in my life. I have multiple coaches in my life. And it's the same reason I coach other men, because we need somebody that can not BS us and be honest with us, but also be gentle and curious with us to help us discover what's actually going on in our life. And frankly, I'm not always good about that. I'm much better at it with other people than I am myself, though. Yeah. Because for myself, I'll look at something and be like, you piece of shit, figure this out. I don't generally say that to other people. I will say that to men, though, more than my children. So if you have a hard time with this and you're listening to this, think about it like you're saying it to your little girl or your little boy. How are you going to speak to them? And I hope that you're a good parent that would be loving and caring with that little boy or that little girl. So be loving and caring with yourself. It does not help for you just to tell yourself that you're bad in whatever circumstance. And then what I would say is two things. Number one, get a coach, because a coach is specifically trained on how to do this. Reach out to Alan, reach out to me. You have two people right here that are willing to help you. And then number three, take a good, long, hard look at the 5 people that are in your biggest circle of influence, the people you spend the most time with, and more importantly, the people that influence you the most. Because whoever those people are is who you will become and who you are, whether you want to admit it or not. There was a Harvard study done several years ago about this. And what he discovered is that the 5 people that are most influential in your life determine, wait for it, 90% of your success. 90%. So whoever you're surrounding yourself with, that's who you're going to become. So if you want to become this next best version of yourself, you got to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with other people that want to become the next best version of themselves. If you want to be a person that's accountable to their actions and has somebody calling you out for stuff when you're not doing it, you got to make sure that you're around people that are willing to call you out and that can be called out by you. Yes. I found this out the hard way. I've had to transition several friendships when I've gotten to a point with those friendships, as deep as our roots were, once I realized that I was on this path, I was willing to be called out, I was willing to do these things, etc. This person wasn't. Yeah. Doesn't make me good or bad, doesn't make them good or bad. It just means, are we on the same path or are we not? Because if we're not on the same path, there's only so much value we can bring to ourselves, our lives, our relationship. And a lot of people think that's really harsh if I remove them more from my world. First of all, you don't have to completely remove them from your world. This is not a black or white thing. You don't have to be extreme about it. You just might have to set different boundaries, different rules around it. But the other thing is, you're also hurting them by keeping them in your life. Because if they're on this path and you're on this path, you're hurting them by not allowing them the opportunity to find other people that are on this path.
Yes.
Whatever that path is. That's true in relationships. It's true in romantic relationships. It's true with spouses. It's true with friendships. It's just true.
Yeah. That is so true. That is so true. You talked about the Harvard study, and I think of Jim Rohn. The great Jim Rohn used to say that as well. We will become the average of the 5 people we hang around with the most. And it really is important to recognize who is in our circle of influence and what's happening with us. And it does mean making decisions on, yes, how often maybe you're hanging out and spending time with certain individuals. And those can be tough decisions. But if you're truly wanting to raise the level that you show up as a husband, a father, a leader, this is the work that we've been called to do. I just want to say, Josh, I just love today's conversation and sharing with us the wisdom of what it means for us to reclaim our identity, redefining masculinity, and really embracing being leaders in our lives. And if men are interested in getting a hold of you and participating in your work, what's the best way for them to do that?
I would say Instagram is the best. Just reach out to me, Josh the Derelict. I answer all of my own messages. I'm on there every single day, multiple times a day, messaging people. I probably message, I don't know, there's a lot of people every single day. So message me there. That's probably the best way. If you don't have Instagram or you think, I don't want to go that way, that's fine. Go to thederelict.biz. That's the website. That gives all the contact information, other ways of getting hold of me. It shows the YouTube channel, the TikTok, the email, whatever way you want to go from there.
You betcha, buddy. So I want to make sure that wherever you are hiding on the internet, we're going to make sure that people can go and find you and get a hold of you. Love today's conversation, Josh. Keep up the great work, my friend. Have a great one.
Thanks, Alan. Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man Podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.